Valentina learned early that life doesn't apologize. It doesn't pause when you're tired. It doesn't slow down when you're hungry. It doesn't care when you're a child. Her father died heroically, as the adults always said, killed in a hot zone while she was still little enough to believe her parents were invincible. After the funeral, people shook hands, offered condolences, and said the same hollow words. "He's in a better place." But no one came back later, when the refrigerator was empty and the rent was late, and her mother's cough wouldn't stop. Veronica, Valentina's mother, tried. God, she tried. She worked when her body allowed it, and when it didn't, she pushed anyway until she ended up on sick leave again. Weeks turned into months. Employers would smile politely at first, then start hinting with that cold tone that meant the same thing everywhere. "We can't keep someone who's always sick." And then Veronica would quit before they could fire her, because pride is sometimes the only thing a person has left. Valentina would come home from school and hear the familiar sound. The bedroom door closed, muffling the sobs as her mother cried into a pillow so her daughter wouldn't have to hear. But Valentina heard anyway. Children always hear. They just learn to pretend they don't. Money was always short. Always. Some nights their dinner was bread dipped into salted sunflower oil, the kind that clung to your tongue and made you feel full for 5 minutes. Other nights it was plain pasta. No sauce, no butter. Just hot, empty noodles that tasted like survival. At school, Valentina was the poorest kid in the room, and the other kids made sure she never forgot it. Kids can be cruel because they repeat what the world rewards: status, appearance, power. They whispered behind her back, loud enough for her to hear. "She's wearing that same sweater again. Look, it's patched." What is that? Her mum's old clothes? Valentina became the outsider, the one everyone stared at when the teacher turned away. She learned how to smile like it didn't hurt, how to keep her eyes down so no one saw the tears, how to swallow humiliation like it was just another meal. Then, when she was 14, her mother died. Just like that. No heroic farewell, no dramatic last words. Just a tired body that couldn't keep fighting. The day after the funeral, a woman Valentina barely knew arrived with the confidence of someone who thought she was doing a favor. Aunt Clara, her mother's sister. She didn't hug Valentina. She didn't ask what the girl wanted. She simply said, like she was collecting a package, "Well, you'll live with me now." Valentina had no choice, and almost immediately she realized the nightmare had only changed addresses. Clara called her names the way other people say good morning. Freeloader, lazy, useless. But Clara herself didn't work much. She didn't cook, didn't clean, didn't build anything. What she did do was drink. Every evening she liked a little red wine. And when there wasn't money for wine, she'd run to the neighbour for homemade moonshine, laughing like it was a funny habit and not a slow, ugly destruction. Clara had a best friend named Evelina who worked at a small store, and Evelina would sell on credit because she'd known Clara forever and because Clara always promised she'd pay at the end of the month. End of the month would arrive and the money would vanish like smoke. Clara would pay just enough to keep the credit line alive, then come home drunk and start her favourite song. "You're a burden. You know that? When are you going to get married? Who's going to take you like this?" Valentina would sit on her bed, fists clenched, nails digging into her palms, and promise herself she wouldn't cry. But sometimes she did, because she was still a kid. Evelina had a son, and Clara noticed. Of course she did. One day, she casually said, stirring sugar into her tea like she wasn't about to sell her niece's future, "So, do you like him?" Valentina kept her face blank, said nothing. Clara didn't care about love. She cared about security. Her security. When Valentina turned 18, Clara became relentless. She painted the future like a commercial. A husband with a store, a full fridge. No more suffering. You'll live like a queen. But the truth was uglier. If Valentina married Evelina's son, Clara would benefit. She could walk into the store and take what she wanted. She could erase her debts with a smile. She could drink without worrying. Clara owed Evelina a significant amount of money, and she was desperate to turn her niece into a solution. Valentina endured it for months. Then one day, something inside her snapped. Maybe it was the way Clara said it, like Valentina's life was a bill to be paid. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the memory of her mother crying behind a closed door. Clara started again. "You're going to marry him, and that's final." Valentina stood up so fast her chair scraped the floor. "I'm not fixing your financial problems," she shouted. Her voice surprised even her, raw and loud and shaking. "I'm not your plan, and not your ticket. I'm not your debt payment." Clara stared at her like she'd never seen her niece as a person before. "You ungrateful." Valentina grabbed her jacket and left, slamming the door so hard the frame trembled. For the first time in her life, she walked with nowhere to go, and still felt freer than she had in years. Later that night, she returned, quietly, when Clara was asleep. Valentina packed her few things, some clothes, worn but clean, folded into a small bag. And then she took something Clara didn't know existed. A little piggy bank Valentina had been filling coin by coin for years. 1 ruble here, 2 there. A secret hope hidden in silence. She also took the only real treasure she owned. Her father's medals, his award documents, the proof that someone had once loved something bigger than himself. Valentina held the medals for a moment, cold metal warming slowly in her palm, like a talisman. Then she left. Her new home was a rented room in an old woman's apartment. The landlord, a quiet, elderly woman with tired eyes, didn't ask too many questions, which Valentina appreciated. People who ask fewer questions are sometimes the kindest. The room was small, the wallpaper peeled at the corners, but the door locked. And no one called her freeloader. Valentina sat on the bed that first night, listening to the silence. It scared her. Then it comforted her, because silence, at least, didn't insult you. Reality hit fast. Rent wasn't a theory. Food wasn't optional. College, dreams, finding yourself. Those were luxuries for people who had someone to fall back on. Valentina had no one. One day at a supermarket checkout, someone handed her a free local newspaper, packed with job ads. She scanned it in the aisle. Most jobs required experience, certifications, education. She had none of that. She circled one number at random. Cleaning staff needed. Of course. After all, when you're young and broke and alone, the world doesn't offer you choices. It offers you survival. She called. They hired her immediately. Not because they believed in her, but because nobody stayed long. The office was filthy. 3 days of trash, crumbs, sticky floors. A toxic team, the HR woman said, with a smile that meant, good luck. Valentina signed the contract, picked up the mop, and walked into a room full of computers and office workers who barely looked up. She started cleaning. She tried to be invisible. But invisibility is a lie in places where people need someone to step on. A sharp voice cut through the room like a slap. "What is that smell?" Valentina froze. A woman stood near the desks, beautiful in a dangerous way. Not soft beauty. Not kind beauty. The kind of beauty that feels like a blade. Black brows, almond-shaped eyes that looked like they'd never known mercy. Hair dark as a raven's wing. Cheekbones high and proud. Lips shaped for smiling, but used for cruelty. Even a little dramatic streak of hair fell at her forehead, like a villain in a movie. Valentina didn't know her name yet, but the air shifted around her like a warning. The woman narrowed her eyes. "What are you staring at? Don't you smell it? Your mop stinks like rot." Valentina's cheeks burned. "Go rinse it. With detergent. Now." The command wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was the tone that said, "I own this place, and I can make you suffer." Valentina lowered her gaze and moved toward the supply closet. As she passed 2 men near the exit, she heard them whispering. They weren't insulting, not exactly. They were evaluating, as if she was merchandise. "Pretty," one murmured. "Yeah, like a poor Cinderella," the other replied with a small laugh. Valentina kept walking, pretending she didn't hear. She rinsed the mop, returned, and continued working. Behind her, the beautiful, cruel woman, Marianne, she would learn, already started dissecting Valentina's clothes with the other women. "That sweater is patched. Those shoes are ancient. Who dresses like that?" Valentina wanted to snap the mop in half and tell them all to go to hell. But the rent and the empty fridge stood like walls around her. So she swallowed it. Again. Day after day, the office felt like poison. Marianne turned employees against Valentina and then turned management against her too. It became a sport, a hobby, a power game. And Valentina, the new cleaning girl with the old shoes, was the easiest target in the building. Only one person seemed different. A young man named Igor. He was one of the ones who had whispered, "Cinderella." But when he looked at her, there was something in his eyes that felt like regret. One evening, he waited near the office because Valentina always finished after everyone else. When she finally stepped out, tired and smelling like disinfectant, he smiled nervously. "Hey, do you want to grab a coffee?" Valentina hesitated. She didn't trust kindness, but she also hadn't spoken to anyone like a normal person in a long time. So she nodded. They sat in a small cafe, and for 1 hour, Valentina almost felt human. Igor talked easily. He listened. He laughed at her jokes. He asked about her favorite books, her childhood, what she wanted from life. And Valentina, against her better judgment, felt warmth spread inside her chest, like a candle lit in a dark room. The next day, one of Marianne's friends cornered Valentina in a hallway. The girl's smile was sharp. "Oh, you're brave," she said. "Going to coffee with Igor?" Valentina's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" The woman leaned closer, savoring every word. "Igor is Marianne's boyfriend. They're basically engaged. And Marianne? She'll destroy you if she finds out." Valentina's mouth went dry. The girl continued, almost cheerfully. "And Marianne's about to become department head. So imagine how fun your life will be." Then she walked away like she'd just delivered a compliment. Valentina stood frozen, feeling that candle inside her chest flicker. That night she barely slept, and the next day the office turned it into a show. When Valentina entered Marianne's department, music suddenly blasted from someone's speakers. A mocking song, a cheap joke. And Marianne, smiling like she was on stage, started asking loud questions so everyone could hear. "So, Marianne's curious. Where do you buy these vintage sweaters? Thrift market? Garage sale?" She pointed at Valentina's boots. "And those shoes, wow, a rare museum piece." People laughed, not too loudly. The polite laughter of cowards who don't want to be next. Valentina stood there with her mop like she was holding her own shame. She didn't cry, not in front of them. But something broke quietly inside her. After that, Igor never invited her anywhere again. In the hallway, if they accidentally crossed paths, he looked away. He couldn't meet her eyes. Because he had laughed with them. Because he was a survivor too. The kind who protects his comfort, even if it means sacrificing someone else's dignity. Valentina understood something important that week. Some people don't hurt you with cruelty. They hurt you with weakness. She wanted to quit. She marched to HR with her hands shaking. And that's when she learned the trap she'd signed without reading. If she left before completing the first month, she could lose her pay. No paycheck, no rent, no food. So she stayed. Because poverty doesn't give you dramatic exits. It gives you endurance. And then, as if her life needed one more burden, one more heart to protect, something small and white appeared in her world. A tiny kitten somehow slipped into the office, barely a month old, shaking, hungry. Valentina panicked, hiding it until the end of the day, because she knew Marianne would throw it out without blinking. She took the kitten home. Her elderly landlady wasn't angry. She just sighed and said, "Well, at least you won't be lonely." Valentina named him Martin. And when money ran low, she shared her last kefir with him, watching him drink and thinking, I can't let him go hungry. Not him. Not again. Not like I was. Finally, payday arrived, the day Valentina had been waiting for like a lifeline. But it came with another twist. That same day, the boss was coming. the head of the entire company network, a man everyone feared. Everyone except Marianne. Because Marianne had managed to charm him. She loved danger. She loved control. She loved being chosen. The boss walked in with military posture, imposing, not old, broad-shouldered, a man who carried authority like a weapon. Marianne jumped up, sweet as honey. "Nikolai Ivanovich," she said brightly, "you haven't visited in so long. We missed you." As she moved, she accidentally knocked over a paper cup of coffee. It spilled onto the floor. Quick as lightning, she kicked the cup under the desk, hiding the evidence. Then she smiled, perfectly, and she looked at Valentina with a cold, calculating glint. Because Marianne had just found a way to set the trap. Marianne's smile didn't slip even for half a second. That was what made her dangerous. She stood beside Nikolai Ivanovich like she belonged there, tilting her head, letting her long, dark hair fall just right, speaking in a voice that sounded warm but carried a hidden blade. "And honestly," she said, gesturing toward her desk with a dramatic sigh, "you wouldn't believe what we've had to deal with lately. HR hires just anyone. The new cleaner, well, she's trying, but the office looks like a pigsty some days." Nikolai Ivanovich's eyes moved slowly across the room. He didn't like disorder. That much was obvious. He was the kind of man who seemed built from structure. Military posture, broad shoulders, heavy jaw. Not old, but seasoned, like life had tried to break him once and failed. Marianne glided closer to her desk and pointed at the floor. A dark coffee stain spread across the tile. "Oh, look," she said, in a tone that sounded like disappointment wrapped in concern. "See? I've asked her a dozen times. She just ignores my workspace. It's dusty, it's dirty, it's embarrassing." Valentina stood frozen with a cloth in her hand, her stomach dropping. She had cleaned that area. She was sure of it. So where did that come from? Nikolai Ivanovich's brow tightened. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. When he spoke, the room quieted like someone had turned down the volume on the world. "Cleaner," he said, looking at Valentina. "Come to my office. Now." Marianne's eyes flickered with satisfaction. Not joy, something worse. Victory. Valentina's mouth went dry. Her legs felt heavy as she followed him down the hallway. Every step felt like walking toward a cliff. Inside his office, he didn't sit right away. He stood by the window, hands behind his back, looking at the city as if it was a map he had to control. "Why is there a mess in my office?" he asked, finally turning. Valentina's heart hammered. I don't know," she managed. "I cleaned, I really did. I don't know where the stain came from." He stared at her, measuring her. "Do you understand how important cleanliness is in a workplace? How small things show discipline?" "Yes," she whispered. Then, for the first time in a long time, Valentina did something she usually never dared to do. She told the truth. "I think she did it," Valentina said, voice shaking. "Marianne. I think she spilled it on purpose. She doesn't like me. She's been targeting me since my first day. Nikolai Ivanovich didn't interrupt. He didn't react. His face remained still, but his eyes sharpened. Valentina swallowed. She humiliates me, she continued, surprised by her own courage. She makes jokes about my clothes, plays music, gets people to laugh. She wants me gone. The boss tapped the cap of his pen against the desk. Slow, thoughtful. You seem like a decent girl, he said quietly. Why would the office hate you this much? Valentina's throat tightened. I don't know. I'm poor. I needed a job. He looked at her again. Your name, he said. Full name. Valentina. She said her last name. When the surname left her lips, something changed. The shift was subtle, but real, like a door inside him had opened to a memory he hadn't touched in years. That's an unusual surname, he murmured. What's your patronymic? Your father's name? Valentina lowered her gaze instinctively. My father's name was Yuri, she said softly. He died. In the North Caucasus, Nikolai Ivanovich cut in. Valentina's head snapped up. His eyes were locked on her, suddenly different, haunted, almost raw. He was my friend, Nikolai Ivanovich said. His voice had lost its edge. Captain Yuri saved my life. He dragged me out under fire after he was already wounded. His jaw tightened. He turned away for a moment, as if breathing was harder. Valentina couldn't move. For a second, she wasn't in the office anymore. She was a little girl again, hearing strangers talk about her father in low voices, calling him a hero, while she tried to understand what hero meant when it didn't bring him back. Nikolai Ivanovich slowly exhaled. So that's why, he said, almost to himself. Valentina stood there, shaking, half fear, half disbelief. Then he looked back at her. Your mother? He asked, quieter now. She passed away, Valentina whispered. A long time ago. He nodded once. And you live where? With my aunt before, she said. Now I rent a room. His hand curled into a fist on the desk so tightly his knuckles whitened. We're going to handle this, he said. Valentina's mouth parted. You mean? I said we're going to handle it, he repeated, voice firm again. Go back to work. Valentina hesitated. And my job? He paused, then said something that nearly made her knees buckle. You shouldn't be pushing a mop for a living. Not after what your father did. Not after what he was. Valentina blinked rapidly. The boss looked away as if he'd revealed too much emotion. Go. She left his office in a daze. That evening, Valentina ran home like she had wings, because when she received her paycheck, she almost cried. Not just her salary, a bonus, a generous bonus. She stared at the numbers as if they could vanish if she blinked too hard. For the first time in a long time, she could breathe. She stopped at the pet store and bought Martin the good food, the kind with real meat listed first. She even bought him a small toy, a silly little feather on a string. On the walk home, Valentina kept thinking, I did it. I survived. She fed Martin and watched him purr with his eyes half closed, and something inside her softened. And then, like life was finally remembering she deserved a break, she got the news. The next day, Marianne was gone. No dramatic farewell, no dramatic scene, just gone. People whispered in the hallways. She got fired. By the boss himself. Can you believe it? Valentina walked into the office and felt the air different. Lighter. Safer. Then she saw the floors being cleaned by someone else. An older woman, unfamiliar. A nervous HR clerk approached Valentina with a smile that didn't match his eyes. Valentina, we need you to sign a new contract. Valentina frowned. What contract? You've been transferred, he said quickly, to a client service operator position. Valentina stared at him. But I don't have training. It's okay, he said, too eager. You'll learn. Valentina realized something then. This wasn't help. This was correction. This was justice. This was someone powerful deciding she was worth more than humiliation. That afternoon, Nikolai Ivanovich returned. He called her into his office again. This time, he didn't look like a man about to punish someone. He looked like a man about to keep a promise. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out keys. He placed them on the desk gently, like they were sacred. These are keys to my second apartment, he said. Valentina's brain struggled to catch up. I don't understand. I bought it years ago, he said, for a family that never happened. It's been empty. You're not going to bounce between rented rooms anymore. Not you. Valentina's chest tightened so suddenly she could barely inhale. I can't, she whispered. That's too much. He waved a hand, almost irritated, like she was refusing a glass of water. It's nothing, he said, and your father would have done more. Tears burned Valentina's eyes. Then she remembered Martin. Her voice cracked. I have a kitten, she said quickly. Can I bring him? For the first time, Nikolai Ivanovich laughed, deep and genuine. You can move in with an alligator for all I care, he said. Bring the kitten. Valentina laughed through tears. It was the strangest feeling, to be offered kindness without a price tag. She moved within days. The apartment was huge. 3 rooms, bright windows, clean walls. She walked through it like she was trespassing inside someone else's dream. Martin explored every corner, tail up like he owned the place. Valentina sat on the floor in the middle of the living room and finally let herself cry. Not from pain this time, from relief, from shock, from the overwhelming truth that her life had changed in a single week. After that, she didn't walk to work. She almost floated. Nikolai Ivanovich treated her like family, but not in a weak, pitying way. He taught her. He explained the business to her. He introduced her to systems, clients, strategies, things she'd never imagined being allowed to understand. And then he said the words that made Valentina's world widen. You're going to university. Valentina tried to protest. I can't afford. You can, he said. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. So she enrolled in an economics program. And for the first time, Valentina felt something other than survival. She felt future. Meanwhile, something else shifted. Igor, the man who had once invited her to coffee, then abandoned her, suddenly found courage. The moment Marianne was fired, he found a spine. He ended his relationship with her, not because he became brave, because he became safe. Then he tried to circle back to Valentina like nothing had happened. "Maybe we could hang out?" he said one day, awkward and hopeful, as if her humiliation had been a misunderstanding. Valentina looked at him calmly and realized she felt nothing. Not anger, not longing, not sadness, just clarity. "No," she said. Simple, cold, final. Igor blinked like he'd been slapped. Valentina walked away, and inside her she thought, how did I ever cry over someone like that? She finally understood what kind of man Igor was. A survivalist, an opportunist, the kind of person who loves only what doesn't cost him anything. Weeks passed, then months. Life became steady. Valentina studied, worked, took care of Martin, and began slowly, so slowly, building self-respect like a house, brick by brick. And then one day, in a pet store, something small happened. Something ordinary. Something that changed everything. Valentina reached for a can of pâté and accidentally knocked it from the shelf. Before it hit the floor, a strong hand caught it mid-air. Valentina turned. A tall young man stood there, holding the can with a grin like he'd just saved the world. "Don't cheap out on your cat," he said, glancing at the premium food in her basket. "Good choice." Valentina laughed, surprised. "I'm trying," she admitted. "I love him." "I love mine too," the man said. "He's a savannah cat. Spoiled. Thinks he's royalty." Valentina smiled. "And mine is a purebred," she said with a playful seriousness. "The breed is Russian, from the noble streets." The man burst out laughing. His laughter felt easy, real, not cruel, not performative. They started talking, and Valentina realized something strange. She didn't feel guarded. She didn't feel small. With him, she felt normal. Like she didn't have to earn the right to be respected. His name was Arkhip. He understood her humor. He listened without impatience. He spoke openly, like he didn't wear a mask. Before Valentina realized what was happening, they were walking together, then standing outside her building, talking, still talking, as if neither wanted the moment to end. Finally, Valentina glanced at the dark sky and felt that old fear of what looks improper. It's the first day. Don't be too obvious. Don't show too much. But Arkhip looked at her as if reading her thoughts. "I don't want to leave," he said quietly. "But I will. Because, respect." Valentina's cheeks warmed. He smiled, stepped back, and walked away. Valentina climbed the stairs with her heart beating too fast. Inside her apartment, Martin meowed impatiently. Valentina fed him on autopilot, but her mind was somewhere else. She lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Arkhip's eyes, his voice, the way he caught the can without even trying. She thought, So it's true. The stories, the books, that feeling of recognition, that strange click inside your chest when you meet someone and your soul says, "There you are." She barely slept. The next morning she woke up exhausted, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't want to go to work. She wanted to run back to the pet store and hope she'd find Arkip again. Because they hadn't exchanged numbers. Because they'd been so busy talking, they forgot. She stepped outside her building and stopped. Arkip stood there, hands in his pockets, like he'd been waiting for hours. Valentina stared. "What?" she started. He smiled, almost embarrassed. "I couldn't leave," he admitted. "I went home, fed my cat, then came back." He pointed up at her window. "I watched your light all night." Valentina's breath caught. "You didn't sleep," she whispered. "I saw your light too," he said gently. "You didn't sleep either." Then he stepped closer, and his voice lowered, turning serious in a way that made Valentina's chest tighten. "It's fate," he said. "I know how it sounds, but I feel it, like it was decided." He took her hands carefully, like she was something precious. "You're mine," he said softly. "And I'm yours. That's it." Valentina should have felt fear, but instead she felt something she'd never truly had before. Safety.